There's two different ways to do alignment in D&D. I don't think either one is particularly better than the other, but it did give me a really cool idea, and I want to talk about it today on Greyhawk Grognard. So alignment in D&D goes back to the earliest origins of the game. In fact, it goes all the way back to chainmail. This is my original one. I'm very happy to have this. Where in the fantasy supplement appendix, it gives you like how to integrate trolls and elves and stuff into a medieval war game. And at the very, very end, it gives you this general lineup list, which is basically just supposed to be used to help you do scenarios, right? So, under law, they have halflings and dwarves and gnomes. Under neutral, they have sprites and pixies and elves. Under chaos, they have goblins and kobolds and orcs and so forth. And it's just basically a way that you could say, okay, all the things in this army should be law, and all the things on that army should be chaos, and elves and other neutral things can be in between. It was just a quick little something that they threw in there. But the idea of dividing things into law and chaos and, not really neutrality, but yeah, that really goes back to authors like Michael Moorcock in his Eternal Champion series, especially in Elric, where you have two competing, not even mythological, just fundamental forces in the multiverse of law and chaos. You have the gods of chaos like Ariok, blood and souls for my lord Ariok. That's the fundamental divide in the universe of you have law on one end of the spectrum and chaos on the other. Other authors have used that very same thing. Just look at things like the Court of Chaos in the Chronicles of Amber. You've got the Court of Chaos on one end and the Realm of Law at the other, and everything in between is kind of where we live. It's something that has been very well used in fantasy literature for forever, and it was something that obviously Gygax was well acquainted with when he came up with first chainmail and then Dungeons and Dragons, where we see it brought into more of a prominence in making up characters. Where we have here. Different alignments, the same things. You have law, neutrality, and chaos. That's how you can align your character. That's how the monsters are divided up, and it gives you a nice kind of mythic, epic way of viewing the universe. Right? You've got the forces of righteousness and law, and the forces of evil and chaos are on the other, and that's all you need really for an epic game, and that was carried forth in basic versions of the game and so forth. And then we had Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which expanded out the system of alignment. So before you had 3, now you have 9 because it added another axis where before you only had law, neutrality, and chaos. Here you also have good, neutrality, and evil. And that gives you, when you combine all of them in a grid, gives you 9 different choices. You can have chaotic evil, you can have chaotic good, you can have lawful evil and neutral good, and so forth. So you get that system of 9 that most of us are familiar with from this book. I'm sure my folks that I'm doing my collaboration with, Eric Tankar and DM Angelo, are going to have their takes on which one's better or worse. But I'm not really going to go down that road. You have a good idea of what it is. In AD&D and those that came after it, the system is basically law is the divide between law and chaos is the divide between the group and the individual. So if you're lawful, you are going to be very much in favor of what's good for the group. If you have laws, you have rules and so forth, that benefit the group, then that's what you're going to do. The laws are the laws, and the laws are there to be obeyed. If you're chaotic, you're not necessarily like a wild man. You're just more individualistic. So it's really the spectrum between groups and individuals. If you respect the group and the laws more, or you respect individuality and free will more, that's where you stand on law and chaos. It takes away the morality of law and chaos and assigns it to the good evil spectrum. So at the good end of the spectrum, you have people who believe that the strong should help the weak, that the benefit of the whole is better than selfishness of the individual and so forth. So you can have chaotic good, which sounds like a contradiction, but it's really not. It just means that you have somebody who values individuality and uses that individuality to help the weak and to help those in need. It's very it does make sense, and as the DM's guide puts it, not all laws are good, so that you can have lawful evil, which evil believes that the strong should rule over the weak, and get the benefit of being strong, of their strength. So you have laws that keep that power dynamic in place. So when you're lawful evil. You can also have lawful good, where you have laws that are in place to help the weak and the downtrodden, and so forth. So it works out. I'm generally going to come down on the side of more options, but honestly, there's no set slam dunk, this one's better than the other. One is more epic mythology that harkens back to the early days of pulp fiction, pulp sci-fi and fantasy. The other is a more nuanced view of morality that gives you both axes, and you can work on that accordingly. This is where my cool idea comes from. What if they're both true in the D&D universe? Now, that's my hot take. Hear me out. What if, back in the hoary mists of time, in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, or in your universe, or in mine, or whatever, there, all nine ways of looking at the world were present. You could still have somebody who believed that you know you want to have the strong over the weak or whatever, but the fundamental divide on a mythological level, on the very most fundamental view of the world, of the multiverse, was law and chaos. So you had, on one hand, you had all things lawful that were allied with one another. So you would have devils aligned with angels and with modrons. They were all a spectrum. They had their different takes on what law meant, but the fact that they were lawful in that mythological time of the world, that was the dividing distinction. That was what mattered. You believed in law, you believed in the rules, and that was the fundamental thing. And on the other side, you had chaos. You had those who believed in ultra individuality. So you had the demons and the slod, and so forth. And the lawful good creatures, which interestingly are called like godlings in in the player's handbook. It's an odd choice. It's also an odd choice that there aren't any chaotic good major things. It's the in D&D, in AD&D. There aren't any really, until you get the Monster Manual 2, where you have divas and solars and things. You don't have any good equivalents of demons and devils and daemons. And in fact, even with the solars and everything, they're just kind of generic. They can be any flavor of good. So it's kind of weird. In Adventures Dark and Deep, I kind of split that out, and I divvied them up, and invented a couple of new things, like angels as lawful goods, and there's archons and so forth. But anyway, um, but in that hoary mist of the very origins of time, that was the division. It was all the beings who believed in individuality, and all the beings who believed in the rule of law. And that was the cosmic battle that was being fought at the very beginning of time. And then you had the neutrals in between, who would either believe just wanted to keep their heads down and wanted to avoid the fight, and were despised by both sides, or maybe they wanted to keep the fight going, like you see in modern Greyhawk, with with a very strong faction of neutrality, who call themselves the balance. They want to keep the wheel turning. They don't want law or chaos or good or evil to ever become ascendant. It's always moving. That could have worked too in that prehistory, but and this is the mythological event that defines the multiverse. At some point in that cosmic origin time, a rift appeared, and it wasn't enough to have law as your defining factor or chaos as your defining factor. That was the time that the devils revolted against the angels, to use a biblical reference. And that was the time that law and chaos divided. And that division is still echoing through the ages, right? So you have the devils hating the angels because they used to be allies, and each sees the other one as having turned on them back in the earliest days. And that is also the origin of the blood war. From the 2E era, where you have the demons and the devils at each other's throats, because back in that time, they used to be on either side of that cosmic divide. And now that that main cosmic divide is no longer there, they still remember, and they're still going at it because they still want to prove that law is a better way of defining strength than chaos, or chaos is a better way of defining strength than law. And that's the origin of that. And that also explains the distrust that the good and evil have for neutrality. We see that in the Gord the Rogue novels, where a diva or a solar or something comes to Gord when he's got the fear parts and demands it, and calls him like a sniveling creature of neutrality who has no convictions or something like that. You have these echoes of that original divide, and something caused it to fracture. There was something made it divide, where the morality became just as important as the law and the individuality, and that's what brought us to the present day. So, in this conception, uh, there it used to be law and chaos back in the various earliest days of the cosmos, and then that fractured, and now we have the nine alignment system. So, anyway, it doesn't really have a lot of immediate impact in a game if you decide to have that as part of your mythology, but it could explain some motives between old animosities that go back literally for millions of years between different factions and things like that. So I just thought it was a neat idea that I've been playing with, and then when we decided this was going to be the topic, it just seemed like a perfect way to bring it in. So anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on, do you prefer the 3 alignment or the 9 alignment system? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. If you dig my idea about the cosmic war and how it fractured into a more generalized conflict, I'd love to hear that too. Please do hit down on the in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Please do like and subscribe to my video, and to Eric and Angela's. Please do. Every sub really does help, and it will help you get notified when my videos come out. But make sure you hit that bell so you get those notifications. Hope you're having a great day, and I will talk to you all later.